I've been kind of binge watching your show, the reruns. This is the first time I've listened live.
I'm so sorry.
And, but, I'm trying to catch up just to see how you all process things. And I was at work on Monday, and I just stumbled onto your show. And there's several of us in the office, and I usually listen to something on YouTube that has to do with the atheist creationist debate. And so we were listening to the episode where the guy was saying that the guy called from Pakistan and said, the fetus or the embryo looks a little bit like some chewed gum, and thought that was proof of God. And we're all laughing at him and stuff. So one of the guys went home and listened to the show. And I said, I'm going to call this show. So he's all excited. So they're going to be listening to what turns up.
Well, the chewed gum caller is actually on the other line, so we'll get to that.
Oh, shit.
Is he really?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
I was going to say, wait a minute, I vaguely remember that. Who was it?
So, Mark, what did you specifically wanted to talk to us about today?
Well, I don't know how deep we want to go, but I've been dealing with the issue of to believe in God or not to believe in God. And, I was raised in a very conservative Church of Christ background, where every word of the Bible was holy and, the Word of God. And when I went to college, I went to the University of Chicago, which is, one of the big centers for evolutionary thought. And I majored in biology, so I dealt with that. And I also spent a lot of time taking classes in the Bible and humanities and Western civilization. So I got a dose of textual criticism, and where you learn that things aren't always the way they appear in the Bible. There's more to the story than meets the eye. So that was an eye-opening experience, and it really threatened my faith. So, I've been processing that all these years. But over the course of time, I'm still maintaining faith. And I kind of feel like, studying evolution, I feel that for most who continue to believe that there's some doubt about the extent to which evolution can explain our existence. I just don't feel that the case is made that there's no God involved with it, so you can probably call me a theistic evolutionist based on that. And I think where we miss each other is I feel we have different standards as people of faith than the atheist community has. I think you're looking for ironclad, rock-solid proof of the existence of God.
Not really. I mean, we can start with literally anything. Right? Like if we can start with evidence, period, that's a great start. But we can't even get there. What it is, post hoc rationalizations or pseudo-intellectual, just these circles that people find themselves looping themselves into so that they can justify their own decisions. But really, start with evidence at all. We're not that difficult. We just need to be able to evaluate things, and the claim of that specific religious claims that can be tested have been tested and haven't turned out so far.
Right. I feel, of course, I've been listening to you various episodes for the last week, so I've heard how you've handled certain evidences that have been presented, like the accounts in the New Testament, the fact that, Jesus died and all his disciples continue to follow him. And to me, that seems like you watch a man die, but you continue to follow him. That would suggest that you saw him risen. That's what works for me.
So, go ahead, Jim.
I just responding to that sentence, the Church of Scientology continues to exist. They believe that L. Ron Hubbard died and didn't rise. They have something about he left his physical form behind, but basically all religions that believe in an afterlife or soul have something like that.
Yeah, I mean, and I could, sarcastically say, okay, same happens in the Book of Eric. The book that I'm, so how do we tell the difference between this book and yours? Right? Why would you turn to the stories to verify themselves, right? Like, the story is the claim. We still have to test whether or not that happened. And even if it did happen, we can actually make the argument that even if that did happen, right, these people died because they believed it, that still wouldn't get us any closer to whether or not that God existed.
Yes, I mean, I'm not entirely disagreeing with you. I just feel you look at the historical source and you measure it and you decide what you can rely on and what you can't. And I went through a period a couple years ago where I actually stumbled onto Matt Dillahunty on a debate about the inerrancy of the Bible, because I was really starting to question that. And he just wiped the floor with whoever he was debating. And I really respected his fund of knowledge, but I was sitting there thinking, well, why do I still believe in God if I don't completely accept every aspect of the Bible? Because I have a lot of questions about that. I don't believe the earth is 6,000 years old. And really, I don't reject any evidence that is out there. So I asked myself, well, then why do I still believe? And, I would have to say that a lot of it is just feeling. I don't really feel I can come out there and prove to you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Jesus died on the cross. I believe I can have reasonable hope that may be true, but I can't sit there and prove.
Should we accept reasonable hope as sufficient to form a belief?
And I mean,
any belief at all.
And not just Jamie and I, but anybody. Should anybody accept that?
I think there's a point in time where you have to set the standard for yourself. I think that's
if I have reasonable hope that I'm going to win the lottery, should I plan my finances around that?
That's an excellent question. If you got to ask yourself, what do you have to do to exploit that reasonable hope? If you have reasonable hope you're going to win the lottery, at least buy a lottery ticket.
Yeah, and in terms of understanding how the lottery works, that is a step that can be shown demonstrably to potentially lead to winning the lottery, despite how short those odds are. Can there be any demonstration, or do you believe that there is a demonstration or anything other than, I hope that this is true, that would get someone into heaven?
Let's see, confuse me a little on that.
Sorry, well, let me say it more succinctly because I'm a little distracted. But I can point to times when people have won the lottery and say, yes, one of the necessary steps to do that is to buy a lottery ticket. Is there a way to point to times that people have gone to heaven? That you think
I don't have any way to demonstrate that people have gone to heaven or gone to hell or have just died, gone to sleep after they die. I don't have a way to show that. Which is why I've been back and forth much of my life with that debate.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're evaluating the evidence, and despite I feel like, forgive me for presuming, wanting to believe something, that evidence is something you're considering, and it seems like honestly, and you want to follow it. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but presumably you want to follow the evidence and the truth wherever it lies or wherever it leads.
Well, yeah, if you're saying that, I'm happy because I think I'm conveying my point of view correctly and you're understanding it. I don't have, I'm trying to be as objective as I can. Obviously, we deal with the subjective aspects of our perceptions, and
Sure.
Naturally I have a bias. I would like for there to be a God, and I would like to have a chance for eternal life, which is the big sell on that. And then, you're hedging your bets against going to hell, like you quoted the Pascals Wager.
Yeah, and I'd like to win the lottery, but there's a certain amount of, if I don't believe that buying 3 lottery tickets and using 3 as the first number and using 33 as the second number, and I actually don't know how to play the lottery, whatever, or having some sort of unsupported set of steps that I believe, because hope and because of ancient traditions, will definitely lead me to win the lottery, even though there's no demonstration that it will. Do you think that that's something that I should spend my time, energy, and money doing?
Well, I think when you're evaluating any type of proposition like that, you got to analyze it and decide, is it a cost-effective thing to do? I mean, when I'm looking at the fact I went to church this morning, I also found it to be an uplifting experience. Got comfort from it. And there was a time, I went 20 years where I didn't go to church at all. And
Hey, Mark.
something bad happened in my life, and I came back to it.
Mark.
And I found that sorry?
No, I just wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
So, sitting on my side of things, you said, but I went to church and it made me feel better and I felt uplifted. Do you think that I would deny that you felt better and uplifted when you went to church?
No, I don't think you would at all.
And so if that's the case, you can very reasonably take the atheist position and understand that, when you go to services that you're comfortable in, or when you surround yourself with community and, feel like you're part of a bigger whole, that is incredibly beneficial. I wouldn't disagree. I actually totally agree that would be very uplifting. I don't understand why, because it sounded like you were using that in your weight about whether or not it was true. Were you, or what was I wrong?
I can see why you would say that. I was using it more as, I'm going to go ahead and worship God. You might say I'm hedging my bets, but
okay. Well,
what's the cost of doing that?
Sure.
To me, it's part of an uplifting experience. I might as well go with God.
Let's explore this. So one of the things we do on Talk Heathen that we haven't done in a while is explore what the argument is, right? This argument that you're making is called Pascal's Wager, right?
Right.
And so
I've heard you refer to it, yeah.
For people who don't know what Pascal's Wager is, you just draw a 4x4 grid and you have, whether it's true or not true, to accept or not accept it as true, right? To believe or not believe. Mm-hmm. And so you take a look, and if you believe it and it's true, you go to heaven. If you believe it and it's not true, nothing happens. You don't believe it and it's true, you go to hell. You don't believe it and it's not true, nothing happens.
Right.
And by that math, it would behoove somebody to believe just in case. And there's a problem, a fundamental issue with Pascal's Wager. And I can actually lay that out really, really easy for you, right? So that's a 2x2. Those are 4 options, right?
Right.
Where's Muhammad? Well, because we have to take Muhammad into account, right? So if we add now it's a 3x3, so there's 9, right?
That also changes the. Sorry to jump in. That also changes the nothing happens when you die if you believe if you accept Christianity as true.
Yeah, because
I'm not sure whether you've read about Muslim hell, but it's pretty bad.
What about?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, the Native American traditions, or Native traditions anywhere. All of those other faiths, right? You have to add in the Greek and Roman pantheons. You need to add in the Norse gods, right? And so once you get there, and then what I would say is there are people who have different definitions of their God. Well, God is actually more like this, or God is actually more like that. And so if I accept each of their claims individually, because that's what Jamie and I try to do. We meet people where they're at. We don't try and, straw man them into a position that they don't hold. And so if I was to accept each of those God claims, then Pascal's Wager becomes infinitely large, right?
Right.
And it gets worse because there is a downside to belief. And you and I both know what that downside is. It's ostracization. It's, using that religion as a tool for bigotry. It's the subjugation of women. It's the violence committed against the LGBTQ communities. You have endorsements like marital rape and, calls to genocide and slavery, depending on which of those things are. So there's a very serious cost to belief, whether it's true or not. What I would suggest, Mark, because this is getting this is getting infinitely large, is instead of hedging your bets, you take a look at it honestly, as forward as you can, and you say, I'm going to follow the evidence. And wherever that leads, that's where I should be going, because I should care more about whether it's true than whether or not it feels good. What do you think?
Yes. I mean, those are all cogent, coherent arguments that I don't disagree with. And I went, and part of what you're summing up is something I've gone through, because when I came to the conclusion that, I can't count on everything that's in the Bible, and I asked myself, then why am I believing still? And, I kind of worked through that process. Why aren't, because if I believe in God, because I believe that, more of a theistic evolutionary approach, and once you put God in that equation, that doesn't mean you're putting in the Judeo-Christian God. Doesn't mean you're putting in the Hindu gods. You got to sort out which God.
But if you're still using Pascal's Wager, now you just added another line item to the infinitely large, pool.
Absolutely right. I did.
Okay. So did that convince you, or are you trying to convince yourself? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like it's bogus, but you're trying to justify it, and that's okay. I've been in that position. I've been in that position. I don't think you choose your beliefs. You can want to, though. You can lie to yourself, and you can try as hard as you can, and it sucks.
Right.
Could that be the case?
That could be part of the process that I'm in as I critically think about, the various options. I'm not so closed-minded Christian who, this is the way it is, but I've looked at, the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus, and I'm inclined to believe it.
What? Okay. Hold on. What evidence for the resurrection of Jesus are you inclined to believe?
Well, I'm inclined to believe the historical information that's out there.
What historical information is out there?
The written word and the behaviors.
Okay, so are you saying that you're using the Bible to justify itself?
To a degree.
Then my book says it's true as well. My book says the Book of Eric is absolutely true. It happened. Mm-hmm. And Eric is God. I know that wouldn't convince you. So why are you convinced by your book?
And that's an excellent question. And I feel there's not great historical data, but, I've read most all the books of Bart Ehrman, and he talks about whether Jesus existed. I don't know if you're familiar with his writing. He's an agnostic.
Sure.
So he's not arguing from a believer standpoint. And he makes a very good case that Jesus existed. And primarily, the best source I think we have is a secondhand source, which is Paul's writing on the fact that Jesus was resurrected. And I find that believable.
So we can talk about Paul, right? If you want to, but sure. Again, you touched on Bart Ehrman, and I started to lose the thread. You were saying that Bart Ehrman makes an incredible case that Jesus existed.
Yes.
Did Bart Ehrman make the case that I'm sorry to say it, especially if it's offensive. Well, actually, no, I'm not. Did Bart Ehrman make the case that a magical person who could do miracles and rose from the dead 3 days after dying and was the son of a deity? Or was he saying that somebody way back when, had the name Jesus, and that's a thing?
No, he did not specify that, this was the Son of God. He made it very clear he doesn't think he's the Son of God.
So who cares?
So, I feel like, it's a stepwise fashion. I believe that.
Hold on. I can prove that I exist. That doesn't mean that I have powers. I can prove that I exist much better than I can prove that Jesus existed. Would that necessarily mean that I have powers?
Not necessarily, not unless you show me some of those powers.
Okay. So how come you're not holding that standard of evidence to your God or to Jesus?
Because that's the best I can get. I mean, I can't refer to the local newspaper of that time and get better information. Like I said, I'm just trying to have some reasonable hope. And, that's where I'm at. I didn't call show hoping to convince you.
No.
That's correct.
Jimmy.
It's the way I
So
see it. It's the way I process it.
Yeah, so there's two parts to that I want to respond to, Mark, specifically. One is you said, I've just forgotten your exact phrasing, but you said that you want to find reasonable hope. And so my first question is going to be why? And then the second part of what I'm going to ask and talk to you about is when you say, I didn't call in to discuss you, to convince you, the second part I want to talk about is why you called in, because I think I know the answers to both of those, but I want to hear what you think about that.
About why I called in, why I think I called in?
Yeah, so first about, you said something about wanting to find hope, or you're just trying to find reasonable hope, or some adjective, hope for this belief. And why?
Well, I think what I meant by reasonable hope, it's more of a generic thing that you'll find throughout the Christian community, and why you get frustrated with it, because we don't always concern ourselves with absolute proof. I think we want a good rationale for why we believe what we believe.
Mark,
and it's not up to the standard that you have for what to believe.
Hold on. We did not demand absolute proof. So why would you assume that we're demanding absolute proof? I'm saying start with anything, right? Start with any kind of, because, evidence points in a certain direction over another direction, right? So once you evaluate evidence, you can determine whether or not it supports one claim or the other. And if it supports neither, then it's not really good evidence, right? I don't understand where the disconnect is. Why do you think we have to have absolute proof?
I guess just from watching a dozen of your shows over the last week, that's kind of the perception that I have. And you may say that's not exactly right. But that's why the discussion is fun. I enjoy having the discussion. I enjoy hearing the discussion.
We're glad you enjoy it.
It's healthy. And I support very much what you guys do.
Well, thank you, brother.
Weird to hear from a believer, but thank you anyway.
No, it's actually reaching across and saying, you know what, we should be able to have these discussions. And that's why Talk Heathen's here in the first place. So I love it. And you're giving us the opportunity to clarify, right? We should be able to evaluate evidence and come to conclusions, the best conclusions we have, using the best tools we have, right? We should follow that evidence. Our position...
We don't have great tools for that time, and so there's limitations of history. You have to look at what's written.
But hold on.
Accounts are. If
that God exists, would that God not have the tools at the time?
I don't know. That's an excellent question. It's a question I ask all the time. Why didn't you make it more clear for us? And we have to engage in a lot of conjecture. We have sporadic written evidence that a lot of people don't believe.
Sure.
That's a frustration I have, and that's an excellent point.
Well, if you were God and you cared, like even if I took all of this as true, right? If you were God and you actually cared about people and wanted to see them, go through whatever this process is that you made, would that be a very fair process to rely on what tools are available? I mean, the best possible case is that God is a malicious monster. I just don't think it's true at all, but I can give you a very compelling case that if that God existed, if I accepted it, and we went through what you accept as true, that God is a monster.
Yeah, you definitely try to make that case, and I'm definitely frustrated that, if I was God, I'd be on CNN saying, hey, here I am, I'm God. We'd have a television show.
Your choice of news show clearly shows that you're biased and et cetera. But
yes, but
sorry,
I'm not sure if I made a mistake saying CNN or whether you're being sarcastic.
I'm joking entirely.
I'm moving let's move back to the conversation.
Okay.
So it sounds like your stumbling block is you really don't want to move forward because there's a lot of pain there. Am I
could
off?
be. I don't know if that's correct, but it's something I'll think on for the rest of the day. But I mean, there was a period in my life where I got divorced when I was 30, and coming from a conservative background, I was convinced I was going to go to hell, because I wasn't going to give up sex for the rest of my life. And so I went through life for 20 years thinking I'm going to go to hell, might as well enjoy the ride. But I never quit believing in God. I just quit believing that I was saved. And then circumstances in my life caused me to come back and realize that that wasn't true. So even when I didn't go, and I was studying and reading and doing whatever I could, I still believed that there was a God.
That is a wonderful piece to take there, actually, and I just want to commend you for it, because at my church, if you said you didn't believe in God, you worshipped the devil, and that doesn't mean that you don't buy in. You actually would still be buying into the story. You would still be believing the story. You'd just be taking, the opposing side of the same story. Yeah. And so you understanding that even when you didn't go to church, you still accepted that God belief was true is actually a really huge step. Wow, man. Thank you. That is an intellectually honest position.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do, is be intellectually honest, because I've been all the way over on the other side, but never could be convinced. And probably a lot of it is because I'm a big fan of intelligent design, and I just can't see how that would proceed without a creator.
Okay, well,
that's probably the biggest factor.
Let's end on that one, because we do have other callers. But let's end on that one. You're talking about
week as well.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, this was a great conversation.
Intelligent design. I've been talking for a bit. Jamie, you want to pick it up?
On intelligent design. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure which presentation of it or which arguments you find, which have made you, in your words, a big fan of it, but. It reminds me of when people look at a set of circumstances and they say, "Oh wow, those circumstances worked out in this person's favor. They must have done it on purpose," or "Oh wow, something interesting or beautiful happened. It must have been done on purpose," right? And I think it's a disregard for the fact that chaotic things and unintended things happen all the time, and they oftentimes produce something beautiful or meaningful, et cetera. And so to look at, wow, look, here's a really complicated set of chemical processes in biology, if it's DNA, or whether it's something geological, of like, oh wow, this set of circumstances and processes has produced this thing that has continued to exist and is beautiful. That doesn't mean intent, because all of the processes that aren't beautiful, or all of the processes that don't appear significant to you, also occurred. It's just that your mind doesn't point to them and go, that's definitely a pattern, right? It's perhaps the watchmaker argument is what's persuaded you, which is you're walking along the beach. I should ask, have you heard the watchmaker version?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with it.
Hold on.
Redirect me here.
Yeah. What argument are you saying convinced you specifically? Because right now we're kind of going broad, and we should go specific to talk to you specifically.
Right. I mean, my background is when I went to University of Chicago, I got a bachelor's degree in biology. So I've been there. I've actually took evolutionary biology when I was there, and I'm a medical doctor. So seeing the complexity of life and how things function has, from the beginning of learning biology, convinced me that there has to be a designer, which you could argue that's the watchmaker fallacy, as you like to call it.
Well, I mean, so let's actually explore that just a little bit. So do you believe that evolution is a thing?
I believe evolution is part of the process of our creation, if I'm going to be a creationist.
Well, I'm not talking about the beginning of things. I'm talking about how things get complex. So let's just leave the abiogenesis part out for now. And let's talk about, complexity, right? Because from what I'm gathering from what you said, it's the complexity of it that it has you convinced. So would you accept that evolution, the way you understand it, right? And I can actually help give a definition. Maybe we should do that first. How do you define evolution?
Evolution is the change of species or the change of genetic codes to create changes in speciation over the course of time.
That's pretty close, actually.
Close, yeah. It's changes in allele frequency over time based largely upon, when I say time, I'm talking about geologic time we can't really fathom, right? And those changes, however minute, wind up changing in the population depending on, the factors that would optimize that species to survive. And if you get two species that are separated, right, and the environments are different, they could change so much that they can no longer interbreed, and at that point it's speciation. It's no longer the same species, right? So with that definition of evolution, do you accept that evolution is true?
I believe that evolution occurs. I just don't believe that it can occur to such a wide range. I mean, we're talking about genetic drift. A few allele changes, and you may be on to two. You may go from one species to two. I've seen that demonstrated. I'm not going to argue against that. What I'm seeing and what I've observed is that you have a very complex DNA code, but I see it as a code, and I don't see how you can.
Oh, hold on, you just made a huge jump, right? We're talking about changes in allele frequency, and then you said, but this thing is a code and it's complex.
Yes.
Why did you make that jump? Who cares if it's complex, right? We should be able to. We should be able to ask. Right? We should ask, why is it this way? Because what you're doing, and here's the funny thing, is I want to help you here, Mark. And what you're doing is you're giving the argument from personal incredulity, right? That is fallacious, and I'll show you why, right? Okay. I don't understand X, right? I'm taking the argument out completely, and I'm just showing you the structure so you can see where the problem is, right? I don't understand X, therefore Y, right?
Kind of like the God of the gaps. Kind of
like the God of the gaps, yeah. And so I don't understand X, or I cannot explain X, therefore Y. That's the argument from personal incredulity, right? I don't understand how this works or how it could get that way or whatever the case is, therefore I'm positing. But why? You've never actually justified. You never showed that it could do it. You never gave evidence for it. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying that the argument that you're giving cannot lead to showing that it's true.
Right.
Do you get the difference there?
Yeah, I do. I mean, awesome. I'm familiar with the discussion. I'm not your typical creationist. I don't think there were dinosaurs on the ark, but I wanted to. I'm happy with how it's going because I want it to remain a conversation, not where you're having to hang up on people in an argument. But so far this is going really well.
I agree. Could you, over the next week, think about that? Because I would love for you to say, hey, Eric, Jamie, I thought about it, and the argument that I brought up, it really isn't a good argument. But let's continue the conversation, because ultimately what I would love to happen is I'd love to get better tools in your epistemological toolbox. Right? I'd love for you to be able to understand and decipher the world as clearly and objectively as possible. And so if I can help you there, even if you don't wind up coming to the same conclusion about God, I think it'll help you in the rest of your life.
You're absolutely right. I mean, this is why I tend to listen to atheist programs. I don't go through a lot of creationist stuff. I think the mistake creationists make, or the corner they put themselves in, is they're forced to defend a 6,000-year Earth and Noah's Ark and things like that. And I'm way past that. And so, and it's good. We're having a good conversation. That's my goal. That was my aspiration all week. And I'll continue to follow your show. And I really appreciate the conversation that you've had with me. And we've been very civil, and I appreciate that.
Dude, you are welcome to call back anytime. Thank you so much.
All right. You guys have a great weekend, and I'll be listening further.
Yeah.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.